having a discussion on intellectual property. And you might ask, what is that? Is it like owning a chair or a piece of land? I suppose the key word there is intellectual. It is something that is intangible in many ways. But I have with me today to engage you on intellectual property officials from the Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis. I have the registrar of the Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis, Miss Jehan Williams, who is also an intellectual property lawyer. And I have pleasant afternoon and welcome to another edition of Working for You. I am Les Roy Williams. Thank you very much for joining us for our program today. As usual, your company is appreciated from week to week. Today we will be having a discussion on intellectual property, and we may ask ourselves, what is intellectual property? Well, today we are going to hear a lot about that. I have in studio with me Miss Nicola St. Catherine, who is the Assistant Registrar of the Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis. Nicola, welcome. I also have Miss Jehan Williams, who is the Registrar of the Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis. Jehan is an IP, intellectual property lawyer. Jehan, welcome. Most of you probably don't even know where the Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis is. Well, today you are going to know where it is. But today we are going to be having a discussion on, I will refer to intellectual property simply as IP. IP and sports, and then we're also going to be looking at local goods and services, a project that the department is involved in. Now, just recently, to underscore the importance of sports, we know that sports today is much more than recreation, is much more than leisure. Sports has become big business. Sports is a big business all over the world. We just recently concluded the Olympics Tokyo 20, and we realize the magnitude all over the world, people with broadcasting rights and all of this, the Olympic brand. And recently we heard about Lionel Messi, departing Barcelona. and joining Paris Saint-Germain. And I read that Lionel Messi's used tissue paper during the farewell press conference at Barcelona is now for sale in a store, auctioned for a massive $1 million. Can you believe that? Just because it's Lionel Messi. He has value, his face, his name, his tissue, just because of him, values now $1 million. His teary tissue.
People will pay for nowadays, but if you really are a sports fan, these things are nothing to you.
Right.
But in the area of sports, what we will be talking about at the Intellectual Property Office, we really want our local athletes and regional athletes, because I want to mention that there is an opportunity for anybody from anywhere in the world to join this webinar. So I'm hoping that our regional partners would also find interest in it. And of course, to say good afternoon to the Registrar of the St. Vincent and the Grenadines office, who is listening right now, Mrs. Lakeisha Caesar Tony. We will be having a seminar on intellectual property, leveraging intellectual property in the sports arena. Now, hopefully, not most of you, well, most of you know where the Intellectual Property Office is, and it's located in the Cable building, right opposite the Cable entrance. That's where our office is, at least for now. We have plans to move shortly, but I guess we will announce that in due time. But what our office does is registers intellectual property rights. And what is intellectual property? It is exactly as the name suggests. It is property that is formed from your intellect. So it relates to expressions of the mind, things that you have to use your brain, your creativity, your talent, and your skills, anything that is expressed. So, Mr. Williams, you actually said it was something intangible. It actually has to be tangible. So while it's in your head, it's not intellectual property, but when it becomes expressed into a tangible format, we say that it becomes fixed. So it has to be fixed or in a tangible format for it to be intellectual property.
And that is what we can protect.
So that's we protect the tangible expressions of your intellect. So if you have an idea to write a book about that time when you fell in love and you went to the movies and all the fancy things that happened, and then you find that somebody has written a book about the same thing, they have not infringed your intellectual property, because for you it's still just in your head. But for the person who took the time and the effort and used their talent and their skill to write the words down on paper, that is what we're interested in protecting. So in the arena of sports now, we start thinking about certain things. Well, certainly not used tissue. Used tissue is not really intellectual. But when you think about the logos for the teams, when you think about sponsorship, the use of the sponsors' logos, when you think about the fact, for example, we just came out of the Olympics and some channels were not able to stream the Olympics, that is intellectual property actually, because cable programming and broadcasts are protectable forms of intellectual property under copyright. And so it means that whoever owned the copyright for that programming would have had to give specific licenses to channels or broadcasters for them to have permission to stream or to broadcast the Olympics. So you own the programming. Programming is property. And so that is something that's protected. And we want to sort of bring these issues to the fore for the people of St. Kitts and Nevis and the region as a whole of how intellectual property works in sports. So on next week, Tuesday, the 24th of August, and Wednesday, the 25th, which is also Kim Collins Day, by the way, we will be having a webinar on leveraging IP in the sports arena. And just to let you know that some of the topics that we will be discussing, we will be looking at sports and IP, like the why and the how. Why is it important for us to even think about sports and IP? We'll be thinking about athletes as brand ambassadors. You know, what are the issues that are associated with that? How do we, you know, commercialize the fact that we may use our athletes in, you know, as digital brand ambassadors or Flow or whatever the business venture. We spoke, Mr. Williams spoke about the face value, the face of these athletes, image rights. When you think about all these FIFA games and these video games and you see the players, these players had to sign off to be included in these video games, because you can't just take somebody's image and include it into a commercial exploit like a video game. So the mere fact that you put your face on it, it has value. The law is different in some respects, you know, depending on the territory that you're in. So we're going to look at it from a St. Kitts and Nevis perspective. So we don't want people to be walking away thinking or wondering what happens here, because a lot of time our exposure with these issues, it's based on US or UK or Canada, but we really want to bring these issues home for our own people. So we're going to be looking at issues like that, and also issues with sports marketing and sponsorship. We'll also be looking at branding for national athletes and teams. So when our Garden Hotspurs and the Connery teams have their logos and they have different, you know, their colors and so on, we have to start thinking about commercializing these things. They can be commercialized rather than just something that's a bit, you know, haphazard, or when you feel like it, or somebody could just go to a printer and say, print me a Garden Hotspur shirt or something like that. We will also be looking at sports tourism and country branding. That's a topic that I gather that many people are interested in so far. That one and the image rights topic seem to be garnering the most interest. But we'll be talking about those issues, and we'll also be talking about the broadcasting and media rights and live streaming as well, so that people can get a full appreciation of what happens off the court to ensure that something happens on the court. And all the contracts and all the negotiations that have to go in it, we need to understand what's happening so that we ourselves here in St. Kitts and Nevis and the region can begin to leverage our own intellectual property.
Sure. Well, Jan, why is it so important to protect intellectual property? While you speak about what intellectual property is, and you gave examples of football clubs having their logos and, and people's face and all of that sort of a thing, why is it so important to protect these things? Why is it so important?
Well, it's so important because protection equals control. And once you protect something and you have the rights, once you protect your intellectual property rights, you have the right to control how it is used, when it is used, who could use it. You develop the terms and conditions of use. Without protection, let's say, for example, of trademarks, your trademarks have to be protected in order to get, your trademarks have to be registered, in order to get protection for them. So if even in the context of sports, like the example I gave earlier, if we have a team who produces jerseys or T-shirts, fan T-shirts, and they don't protect their trademarks, what we could see happening is that any random person with the skills and resources to print T-shirts could simply print the logo on these T-shirts, make the money without having any sort of responsibility to share the proceeds from those sales. So what you want to do is to protect it, to ensure that you have a legal basis to take action against anyone who uses your intellectual property without your permission. So protection equals control. And in many respects, when it comes to intellectual property, without that protection, there is absolutely nothing you can do to ensure that you reap the rewards from your work.
Mm-hmm. Right. Now, the different rights, because we're talking about intellectual property rights, you having the right to own your intellectual property. Mm-hmm. It is your right. Mm-hmm. And to benefit from it as well, and nobody has that right to steal it or to use it without your permission. Now, the different rights, because we hear about this, you spoke about trademarks, but I suppose you have other rights like patent. The different rights protect different types of intellectual property.
Yes. Different rights protect different things, although in one thing you might have many different rights. So think about a phone. A phone, for example. The design of a phone is one right. So that could be considered an industrial design. So you may have an industrial design relates to the aesthetic value of the product. So when we talk about designing things and the way that something looks, then we start talking about industrial designs. When you start thinking about the algorithms and the circuit breakers and the apps I don't even want to talk about the apps yet, but the physical component of it, provided that they are new, and new means does not exist anywhere else in the world, provided that they're new, they could be subject to a patent. So when we start talking about things that are new and they add a new element to solving a problem, then we start talking about patents. We talked about, yes, new and innovative has to be, that's when we start talking about patents. We start talking about trademarks when we think about things that distinguish goods and services from one another. So if I place 2 bottles of water in front of me with no label, you would not know which one is Dasani and you would not know which one is Island Purified unless you have a visual sign of which one is Dasani and which one is Island Purified. So those visible signs are called trademarks. So trademarks, the purpose of trademarks is to distinguish goods and services from one another. And then we have our friend, our favorite friend, well, my favorite friend, copyright. I love copyright. I could talk about copyright all day. Yes, so we have copyright now. We talk about copyright for original pieces of literary, dramatic, artistic, and musical works. Also with broadcasting, cable programming, and arranged published editions of works as well. So when you talk about those original pieces of work, then copyright comes into play.
So you're talking here about the protection of the expression of ideas.
Yes.
Not the ideas in themselves. Original ideas. So you're talking about dramatic pieces and all of that sort.
Movies,
literary
plays. So dramatic.
Poetry.
Yes. So dramatic refers to movies, theater productions, music. Well, we know music. Literary work relates to words intended to be spoken or sung. And then artistic are the visual works, the photography, the paintings, the sculptures, These sorts of things are what would fall under artistic work.
Films.
And right, so they would be protected under copyright if they are original.
It has to be an original
It has
piece.
to be an original piece. It has to be an original piece, or else it cannot be protected by copyright.
Okay, so you spoke about trademarks, you spoke about copyrights, you spoke about patents. What about trade secrets?
Nicola, you could take that one.
Because it's about trade secrets.
Why? Because it's a secret. Tell us what it is.
Well, as we have discussed before, the exploitation of one's intellectual property is where you may derive your bread and butter. And the trade secret, you cannot protect what you have not divulged, what you have not exposed as this is what I want protected. Trade secrets are such that your best way to protect your intellectual property is to simply keep it to yourself. The day that gets out in the public, you have lost all benefit. You may still have some kind of right, but it's be a hard sell to prove it. The best way to protect a trade secret is to keep it just that. Everything else, trademark, patents, industrial design, requires that you send a description, you elaborate on what it is so that we who are able to help you exercise your rights to protect it know what we are protecting, but we cannot help you with a trade secret.
There's another area that we didn't mention, which is very popular across the region, and I'm hoping that St. Kitts and Nevis gets an opportunity to join the party as well. There's an area called geographical indications, or GIs for short. So these are products which have a unique quality based solely on the fact that it was grown or produced in a particular place. So we have things like Grenada nutmeg, which is revered as a superior quality because it is grown in Grenada and not found anywhere else. You have Demerara sugar. We have Jamaica jerk seasoning, Blue Mountain coffee. All these different products which are associated with a particular place. So we really would like the opportunity to, find out more about what we have here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Is our spinach, superior because is it greener? Is it richer? Does it have a different texture? Is it richer in nutrients? Sweet potato?
Does the
anything?
soil
What are
contribute to
these
it?
things? So we at our office we have engaged a number of ministries in government to spur this kind of work. The law is there to protect it. The law is also there to protect original strains of plants. If we had a particular strain of marijuana is quite popular right now. If there was an original strain of marijuana, and it could be protected in law. So these are the kind of things that intellectual property protects, the very special, the very unique, the very original things. And these are the things that we try to promote so that people can feel a stronger sense of national identity as well.
And derive some benefit.
And exactly, and derive benefit as well.
Right, so these would fall on the cultural things that are cultural to us, our niche markets.
Yes.
Right. Now, you touched on something earlier, Jihan, but can you elaborate a bit on it in terms of personality rights?
Okay.
Image rights.
The personality rights or image rights, that's actually not intellectual property, but it is close. So this question comes up every January. Well, not in recent times since we've had COVID. But there always seems to be someone who was upset that their picture from Juve ended up on a magazine somewhere and nobody asked my permission, nobody sought my input on whether or not my picture could be used for that. So image rights protect, or the law associated with image rights protects your image. But unfortunately, it only extends to what you call celebrities. So persons who have an actual value, their image, you will buy the shirt because it has Rihanna's face on it, or you will buy the shirt because it has somebody's name on it. So in those instances, because of the personality associated with the product, then you have a right to control how it is used. That's not it's not very close. It's not intellectual property, as I mentioned, but it is related, and it comes up quite a bit.
Yes, and then we have, you know, a lot of brands, branding, like you have Nike, you have Reebok, and all of that sort of a thing. Can I just make a pair of shoe and use a Nike logo on it?
No, you can't. You have to get the permission from Nike or Reebok, or you would be guilty of counterfeiting.
But we are seeing so much of that, though. For example, let's even talk about China. We get sneakers all the time, but they are not the authentic, but yet they have the Nike.
It's actually illegal. It's illegal here in St. Kitts and Nevis as well. We have situations where in Barbados, as recent as last year or the last 2 years, Rihanna sued a store for selling fake, Rihanna and Puma sued a store that was selling fake Puma goods. And the case actually went as far as the CCJ, and it has been upheld that where persons have sold goods that are counterfeit, and counterfeit means that you have attached somebody else's trademark onto a product that does not belong to them, then you would be guilty of an offense. And under our law, it's a fine of $15,000 to $40,000 or imprisonment. So we really, the law is there. But one of the things that the question that usually follows that, us saying that, is, well, how come you all don't go after, you know, these stores that are selling these fake products? For one, that's not the responsibility of the Intellectual Property Office. Intellectual property rights are personal, which means that it would have to be Puma starting an action to have their goods, their brand protected. So our responsibility in that sense is really just to make sure that the framework is strong enough to support persons like Puma who may want to start an action against someone who is selling counterfeit goods, or someone who is manufacturing fake Nike swooshes, because that is also an offense as well. So we're there to support, but it would have to be for the rights holders themselves to institute an action for that.
Okay, when you look at an action, institute an action like that, what are you looking at? The intent of the person to benefit commercially, economically?
Yes. That's mostly the focus in the law. So it doesn't usually extend to like personal use. You do something for just you. But when you start to do it 10, 20 more copies and you're selling them and things like that, then it would extend to that sort of situation.
Allows you to copy could actually have you could have legal action taken against you just to have the equipment.
Yeah, we live in a world with so many fake things, printing fake this and fake that. But we have what you call bootleg as well, Nicola. You are, and I've seen it here. I've seen it when I lived in Jamaica, and people taking CDs and copying them, original CDs, copying them and selling. Is that right?
No, because the person who would have paid for the video to be made, who would have paid for the reproduction, who would have bought the reproduction rights, who would have bought the broadcasting rights, is not reaping the benefits. Somebody is siphoning it off, and they're not even paying any proper licensing fees or any kind of franchising towards getting the proper permission to copy. And persons are choosing to buy it because it's cheap. The problem is you are not going to get the quality that the original rights holders were aiming for.
Some people don't mind. Some people don't mind getting the quality, but certainly the rights holders mind. Yeah. They mind the fact that, you know, you're using a bag that you claim is Louis Vuitton, but then in 2 years it starts to peel, and I'm just being conservative, 2 years. It starts to peel and so on. But this is really the focus of intellectual property, to give Louis Vuitton and all these other rights holders. And we always tend to go towards Louis Vuitton and all the other big names, but this could really be Sassy V in St. Kitts and Nevis. This could be Brown Sugar in St. Kitts and Nevis. It could be anybody else who recognizes that there are people who are using my brand without my permission.
Yeah. Let's look at it. We have the Caribbean Premier League that is soon to start in St. Kitts. That's a big sporting event. It is viewed all over the world. It is a brand. It is a brand. You have players who are coming in, they're well known. You have, it has to be marketed, and then we have to have broadcasting rights, media rights, and so on. Could you tell us a bit about that, Jihan, in terms of broadcasting media rights?
Well, that's a whole afternoon topic, but to just put it succinctly, like I mentioned, the person who is broadcasting has the broadcasting rights. So the person who is filming and is packaging it to be broadcast, they have the right, and that is a right under the Copyright Act. And so they get to determine who all gets to show it. And so they have this, and you call that licensing. So when you've licensed to ZIZ or NBC or CNN or one of those other channels to broadcast this thing, it's because there's been a clear licensing contract between CPL and the channel who is broadcasting. A very simple example I like to use, on Sundays we see ZIZ broadcast, church services from Antioch Baptist Church, and that would have had to be subject to an agreement as well. So not just because you're there and you see cameras, like there are a lot of negotiations that go on to make sure that people get properly compensated for their work. So the drones and the way that they pan in, the way that they could zoom in, they have cameras that could be many feet away, but you're right there at home. All these things are investments, and the skill it takes to know when to zoom in and know when to zoom out. These are things that have value, and so the person's broadcasting may seek to derive the greatest level of benefit from it. Now, some people would say, like, well, why they just don't give everybody a right? But sometimes you might want to keep things a little exclusive to ensure that you can get the highest value for it.
Let's talk a little bit in terms of plagiarism, or copying people's work and not giving people credit for it. Does that fall under the very same sort of intellectual property? For example, if I write an article and it has the byline SKNIS, and somebody takes that article, put it on their page, and take off my byline as though the article is theirs. Tell me about that.
No, I remember when I was doing my master's degree, I did a media class and I learned the word journalism. And that was a very eye-opening concept to me. Not realizing that when I came back home, that this would be a thing, like journalism is a thing, where it's exactly what you said, where somebody just changes the byline, switches up a few words, and passes it off as my article or the article of my media house. So they're just churning out things without maybe, any significant changes. So you're churning out other people's things. So I learned about journalism, and I look at media very differently when I came back home. But essentially, you have a right as a copyright holder. Bear in mind, remember we said it has to be original, it has to be, and an article would fall as a literary work. So assuming that it's a literary work, that an original piece of work, then you would have protection under the Copyright Act. So you have the right to object to someone altering your work. You have the right to object to someone treating your work in a way that you find to be derogatory. And you also have the right to not be attributed to work that is not yours. So after they changed up the article, but they still left by LesRoy Williams, that would be, you have a right to object to false attribution, because you may be insulted afterwards. They might have, typos and grammatical errors, and I know you're very serious about that. So you may be so offended by the fact that somebody has put their name on your work, your name on their work. So you have a right to object to that. But yes, plagiarism is a form of copyright infringement, and we're talking about where people just take other people's work and include it into their own. It doesn't matter. There is not a formula to say that it's you can take 10% or 5% or whatever. Once you've taken something of substance, and something of substance has been defined so many different ways, and it could be something as small as a line in a song. It could be something as small as 2 seconds has been viewed as copyright infringement. So we can't even say how much would be seen as substantive. So the safest thing to do is not to use other people's work, or when you use it, to give them the sufficient acknowledgement.
Right. Now, Jihan, you would know from being to university and so on and Nicola as well, that plagiarism is one of the biggest crimes in academia, and that people are even dismissed from universities for it once you're caught.
You can also be guilty of copyright infringement,
yes,
and there can be civil and criminal charges for that as well.
Right. Now, what is the relationship between intellectual property and economic development?
Whew.
Because that, to me, seems to be, we can spend all the time we have here speaking about intellectual property. We began by speaking about sports, and I said that sports is big business. It is not just about anymore, recreation and leisure. All of that's a part of it, but it has been commercialized. And you're hearing things about the UEFA, you're hearing about FIFA, you're hearing Manchester United, Barcelona, all of these big clubs and so on. They have their own T-shirt, their own jerseys, their logos, they have merchandise.
No, intellectual property and economic development. I feel very passionate about this. But I think I can simply say that when we look at the people who we see as economically secure and financially stable, they tend to have property, land, houses, cars, and money in bank accounts. Now, the average person, or as we like to say, and I don't really like the term, the small man, the small man doesn't necessarily have that access right away. So unless you have inheritances and or somebody leaves something for you, then you won't necessarily have that gateway into economic prosperity. Now, what we try to do is to promote intellectual property because all of us have it.
Yes.
Every single last one of us produces intellectual property. So it is the gateway towards average people getting towards economic stability and for everybody to be able to contribute to economic development. Because it's about talent. You may not have the rich uncle or the rich daddy, but you have talent. You may not have gone and finished school and gotten a degree, but you're very good with your hands and you're able to, yes, you can create. So why one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about intellectual property is because I see it as a gateway for everybody to get an opportunity to, make themselves prosperous. It doesn't have to be, you don't need necessarily a lot of input. And we see this every now and then when you have all these people on social media who have become famous on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube. I mean, Justin Bieber was found on YouTube. And we have so many examples of people who have made use of their talent and technology and made themselves economically rich.
I heard that Rihanna was discovered at karaoke. Somewhat what I heard. I don't know if it is true.
Well, I think it's I've heard parts of that story, but again, it's the right person seeing and
The
making,
right person saw
yes, and making
yes.
making connections. But granted, not everybody is going to become millionaires. But imagine if you can create multiple streams of income. So imagine if you're gaining royalties from music and you have a huge catalog. That's like little, I see it as like you have little taxi drivers and every day one of the taxi drivers brings home something. If one day one brings home $1 and the next one brings home $10, okay, at the end of the day you may have 50 drivers out, but and everybody brings home $1, that's $50 that you didn't have before. So you have your little taxi drivers out there playing their trade for you. And it's things that you created from your intellect, from your talent.
Because it is a completely renewable resource. It is inexhaustible. You cannot, there is no way that you cannot make money from it. There's no way you cannot make money from it. You're forever, your mind is forever churning out things. Once your mind is forever churning out things, you can make some money from it.
You just keep trying. Yeah. You just keep creating and putting that one. Maybe nobody might like this one. Maybe you might write a book and nobody buys it.
Not this year,
but then it's out there and somebody might see it long after you're gone and then it's a gateway. It's a gateway for economic development for ordinary people who don't necessarily have the financial backing and advantage that other people have. And what we see happening is that a lot of big businesses are understanding this, and they might offer you, $2 $200 to come sing a jingle for them, but the benefits they gain from that $200 jingle far outweighs $200. And so we think it's really important for people in St. Kitts and Nevis to recognize this sort of value that's in their intellectual property, things that they are already doing, things that they're already creating, but they don't realize that there are ways to monetize it and to commercialize it.
Right. Now the office, the IP office that you lead, Jihan, how can, for example, local artists and poets, for example, can they register their work with the office?
Okay.
And what will it take for them to do that? Who can register, and how can one register?
Okay, so there is not a requirement. I want to make it abundantly clear that when it comes to copyright, there is, it's an automatic right. And so you don't have to do anything in order to get copyright protection. However, it is in the interest of persons who create to position themselves in a way so that they can benefit from their work, but they have to put themselves in a position to prove, that they are the owners of the particular work. So one of the things that we recommend is that poets and musicians and other people who create copyright material is to think about registering your work. Now, St. Kitts and Nevis does not register copyright protected work. We don't register copyright protected work. However, you can register in the United States and you can register in Jamaica. Those are the closest places where registration can happen. However, that is only one thing that you can do to establish yourself as the owner of a particular work. You can also consider doing affidavits where you do an affidavit stating that the poetry attached are the works of LesRoy Williams and they were written at particular dates. And then what happens is that when the court signs off or the court stamps the affidavit, it gives you a piece of evidence. Should anyone come later and say that this particular work is mine, then you can prove with your affidavit that the work really, I've had this work since the time and day of signing. And so it helps to bolster your case that you did not copy somebody's work. So it's not that you need to register, it's just that registration is a form of helping you to prove that you have been in possession of a particular work at a certain point in time. But you could also do things like emailing your work to yourself, so that you have a timestamp of your work. And there's the old method of mailing things to yourself that they call the poor man's copyright as well. But there are different things to do, but you really just want to be in a position to prove that you've had this work since a particular time. Nobody's going to certify. I think a lot of people think that somebody is going to come and certify that your work is original. Nobody is going to certify that your work is original. They basically are saying that I, as an independent person, saw this work on December 17, 2007. That's it. So that should a dispute arise, then you have an independent person saying, well, I don't know what happened before December 17, 2007, but I saw it on that date. So if somebody comes and says, in 2021 and says, this is my original work, then you can pull your affidavit from 2007 that shows that you've been in possession of it from that time. I always like the example of walking into a store and you pay for goods. And you pay for you walking out of the store, and especially in the U.S., where some buzzers might go off because somebody forgot to take off a tag, the metal detector or something. They forgot to take it off. So how you get out of that situation is by proving with a receipt that you paid for the goods and you're entitled to have them. Now, in the same way, even if you don't have the receipt, the goods belong to you because you paid for them. But it helps you to prove that the goods belong to you and you paid for them if you could show the receipt. It's the same way that registration works and copyright.
Now, the IP rights, do they have a limited time or an unlimited time when you have IP rights? I mean,
Nicola could handle that one.
And for example, what are some of the rules? Because I suppose if you have the rights, then there are certain rules for the use of your property and so on.
Okay, let me start with the simplest one. Trademark protection in St. Kitts and Nevis lasts 10 years. And you are free at the end, at expiration of 10 years. You can renew it for a further 10 years, and you can renew it for as many of those periods as you wish. In terms of patents, the maximum duration of protection that you could apply for is 20 years. And after that, you do not renew. It will go into the public domain and everybody will have access to it. That's one of the reasons why every time they have new technology and new innovation, they make a killing with the price, because they're trying to recoup as much of the monies and resources they spent on research and development before they know that they will no longer have control over that intellectual property. Copyright, each one of them is special. Copyright, copyright as we know it in terms of manuscript, not photography. Photography is 20 years, but music for 50 for everybody, including photography? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Your rights expire 50 years after you die. So if you live to be 100, anybody wanting to exploit your work without being liable for infringement or counterfeit will have to wait 50 years after you die.
So I suppose who is going to deal with that after you die? Whoever you left your...
You can leave it in your will that the royalties or proceeds of sale from any of your works go to a particular person. Just the same way that you would leave your house, or
yes,
you can do the same thing for
in your will. You put it in your will.
Yes. Or even if you don't put it in your will, or somebody dies without a will, then whoever would be entitled to the property, just by the regular operation of law, somebody will be entitled. So somebody will inherit that.
You notice that a lot of, well, not so much now, but they would, especially in the animated cartoons, a lot of the music they use is classical music, because the likes of Beethoven and Mozart have been dead long, and more than 50 years have been passed. So nobody can accuse anybody of infringing on their rights. But the more recent ones, that is where you get a lot of controversy where, okay, we still have entitlement to these rights, and you do not have our permission to use them as you see fit.
Now, how serious is intellectual property theft? How serious is it?
Locally?
Yes.
Well, if we have to look, the marker for that is usually case law. And unfortunately, we haven't had, well, I know of one case that's in progress right now, but we haven't had much intellectual property infringement cases being tried in St. Kitts and Nevis. Not to say that it's not serious, because we all know of examples where it's happening. But like I mentioned, that the situation is that it has to be, the action has to be brought by the rights holder, and I think that persons take advantage of the fact that Louis Vuitton persons and Nike and so on may not come to St. Kitts and Nevis to file action. So I think people take advantage of that. However, we have in recent times been questioned by some very big names about our processes, because they're interested in enforcing their rights and protecting their rights here. I should mention as well that we have almost 7,000 live trademarks on our books. Well, not live, but 7,000 trademarks, and about 2% of them are from locals.
Wow.
So that tells you that there are some very big names, big and small, who are trying to get protection in St. Kitts and Nevis. But our locals are not protecting their own brands.
Right. And by not protecting their own brands, they won't benefit?
Not that they won't benefit, but if somebody infringes on their rights,
They have no recourse.
they have no recourse.
They have no recourse.
It's like insurance. So if you have insurance and a hurricane comes and damages your house, you could always pull back out your policy and tell the insurance, build back my house.
Yes.
But the same way that, for example, like with trademark infringement, somebody has taken a business that has your name or a name that is confusingly similar to yours, unless you have registered and you have that certificate that says that Lesroy Williams is the proprietor of this trademark, then there's really nothing that you can do. And the funny thing about it as well, imagine you've been in business for about 15 years, you've developed a clientele, everybody loves your things, and then somebody comes up with a name that is like yours, and they've only been in operation for a year, and they come to us first to register the trademark. We can't, for one, we can't tell you that they've done this. However, the marks will go out into the public. Well, it's in the Gazette for the moment, and we give people the opportunity to object. But if you don't see it and you don't object, and that person gets to register the business name that you've been using for 15 years, they can then actually turn around and stop you from using that business name. So it's whoever is first to register, not necessarily who's been there the longest, but who's first. So that's one of the reasons why it's really important to protect your brand, especially if you're in a business where you have developed such a strong clientele as well. You make sure that nobody gets to have an enterprise trademark that is close to yours or identical to yours.
Now, sports sponsorship is a big thing. We have the CPL games coming up, and we are going to have sports sponsorship. What is the relationship between sports sponsorship and trademark rights? The link. I know that, for example, we just had the Olympics, and we saw all the sponsors. And I suppose if Coke is the sponsor of the CPL, I can't take a bottle of Sprite on the compound.
Well, that's the power of negotiation. And again, we will be talking about these things at the webinar next week. But those are the stipulations that you get to use. You do not get my $100,000 unless you make sure that not one single Sprite bottle gets on this ground. You make sure that my logo is brandished everywhere possible. You make sure that in your camera shots, my logo is positioned in a particular place. You make sure that every commentator, when the camera shoots on them, there is a bottle of Coke in front of them, and the logo has to be placed to the front so that people recognize that it's Coke. So, right, so there are all these different things that come into play because people recognize that brands are extremely valuable. And we all have reactions to brands and we don't even recognize it. If I say the word Disney, you feel something. You think about all the different things that Disney is associated with, and you have a reaction to that. If I say something that you really, the name of, you may not even have to say much about a business or an experience, but you just call the name of a product that you don't like. I don't know if, well, I know for sure. I don't see it anymore, but do you remember V8 tomato juice?
Yes.
Jeez, that thing was awful. but you hear V8 and you already have a reaction. That's the power of branding. And so when people see that something is sponsored by a particular brand, an event is sponsored by a particular brand, they feel a sense of connection to the brand if they are connected to the event. So if you have an event where you see children being associated, reconnected with family and, family fun day, and you see that it's sponsored by Flow, then you might feel a bit more encouraged to support Flow because you understand that this is where your money goes. It goes to these kinds of events. So we'll be talking about those issues. And I should also mention that these topics will not be discussed by me or by Ms. St. Catherine, but we have, WIPO has secured IP experts. We have one from Germany. We have one from WIPO. He's Trinidadian, but I think he's been in Trinidad so long, we can call him somebody from Switzerland. We have, and two. One from Germany, Trinidad and Tobago, and Jamaica. So persons who work, live, breathe intellectual property and sports.
You really have some high-powered.
Yes, and we have
here.
our own former national Olympian, Mr. Delwayne Delaney. He's also making a presentation as well.
Yeah, the sponsorship that we were speaking about a while ago, it is, I'll sponsor you because you said it's a matter of negotiation. So I will sponsor you. I am a big name, but at the very same time, my brand is seen by the entire world. So that is also for me big marketing. My product is being marketed on the world stage.
You know how expensive, for example, advertising is during the Super Bowl. People pay millions of dollars to get ads during the Super Bowl. 30 seconds, a minute, or something like that. They pay millions for it because they know so many people around the world are watching the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Talking about sports, let's talk about Kim Collins. I know you mentioned, and I suppose it was not by accident, but you said that the webinar, I think, is happening at the same time that is Kim Collins Day. Yes. Was there a purpose why you mentioned that? Because
certainly was not by accident. It was not by accident. Kim, no matter where you go in the world, the name Kim Collins is what people think about a lot of people think about when they think about St. Kitts and Nevis.
In fact, just to cut you there, the Olympics, the Tokyo 2020, when they mentioned
Jason Rogers
yes, and Amir
Clark.
Amir Clark, they had to mention Kim Collins, is that they were
Yes.
in the shadows of Kim Collins.
Yes, he has certainly been a well-recognized, well-celebrated local athlete for us here, and with a lot of international acclaim and respect. And so we really wanted to focus on that day. I know some people were thinking, you know, you guys are going too close to CPL, nobody gonna pay attention to you. As a matter of fact, we had it first originally for the 25th and the 26th, but CPL is opening on the 26th, so we shifted it from the 24th to the 25th. But it's against the backdrop of someone like Kim Collins' success and the acclaim that he has brought to St. Kitts and Nevis, that we want to have these kind of discussions. We're having discussions about branding and marketing and rights, media rights and image rights, because we want our athletes to not just aim towards his level of success on the track, but let's talk about what happens behind the scenes as well to get you to that point. I know in the U.S., Sha'Carri Richardson, you know, a lot of people have been talking about Sha'Carri. She didn't make it to the Olympics because of, you know, the incident with her drug test. But Sha'Carri didn't run, but Sha'Carri has millions of dollars in branding. Somebody has to be negotiating these things. Or people will literally just go and say, okay, you're here, thank you for coming. But we need to recognize that my presence has a value. So if you want my face on your marketing, it has a value. If you want to broadcast my game, it has a value. And so if we understand these things here and we stop thinking about things, we have a way of thinking about things, as you mentioned, that sports is just physical, you know, entertainment, but there is a commercial value to this enterprise as well.
Yes, and because there's a commercial value, and because, as you mentioned earlier, Jihan, in terms of the sponsorship and some of these big names, Nike or Coke or Coca-Cola or whatever it is, they're sponsoring these big sporting events. They're also sponsoring individual athletes,
Yes,
and sportsmen and women. And their product or their brand carries a certain, you know, the name, the quality, the integrity. And so therefore, these events and these people with these sponsorships have a responsibility to live up to a certain standard.
yes.
And when they don't live up to that, and when things do happen and so on, you find that they drop them because they can no longer represent what they stand for.
But it goes back to what I was speaking about earlier about the reaction. So you hear a brand, you hear Usain Bolt, you have a reaction. You like him, you love him, he's neither here nor there for you, but you have a reaction. And they will go to lengths to secure these athletes because they recognize that people are having positive reactions to their activities. They love the fact that he loves children. He is, you know, he participated in the He for She campaign. So women love him and men want to be him and things like that. So then when things happen and they get themselves involved in activities that the brand feels goes against what they stand for.
No longer a positive image.
Yes, the reaction changes. They think that the reaction changes, and so they have to protect their own brand, and drop those persons. But you know, it's interesting to see sometimes that the brands make mistakes too. I know Allyson Felix, for example, was she just won a gold at the Olympics, and she was a Nike ambassador, and she was dropped because she was pregnant. and she turned around and got gold. And she said she did this so that to show women and mothers that you don't have to sacrifice your goals and so on. So I'm sure Nike feels a bit bad about dropping her, but we realize the whole venture of building brands and creating that sort of atmosphere where people feel a certain way about you as an athlete, as a person. We all have brands. When somebody hears your name, they have a reaction.
We all have brands, and that is true, but at the very same time, sometimes there's such there's so much demand placed on a person to live up to a certain standard.
That's
something
true.
When, you know, the pressure of having to live up to that. We look at the Osaka, for example, you know, and people are realizing that all of these sportsmen and women, that they have to live up to such a high standard of winning or losing, and the companies that sponsor them and all of that sort of a thing, and yet they are human beings suffering with depression,
Yes.
and suffering with all the human ailments and the fragility of just being human.
Yes.
And then you realize that, yes, the power and whatever comes with being attached to a certain brand and living up to this and that, but at the very same time, we are human, we are frail, and so on. It's not just about the brand. Sometimes you have to step back and realize, look, this is me.
But the smartest people make their humanness part of their brand.
Yes.
So then you realize that, I'm sure, for example, we're going to see Simone Biles doing a lot of ads for mental health and support for mental health initiatives.
There we go.
So you incorporate it into your brand. You try not to create brands that are not authentic, because then I think that's where people run into problems, when they try to be something that they're not.
Right. Okay, Gian, we are going to go to and Nicola, we are going to go to the phone lines. We have very limited time left, but nonetheless. The numbers to call are 466-2666, 466-2666. The cell number is 662-8674, 662-8674. The Digicel, 767-4765. That is 767-4765. And the overseas number is 1-239-645-1500. 1-239-645-1500. We await your calls.
Second project that
yes,
we're working on.
Local goods and
Yes.
services.
So
Yes.
what is happening with our local goods and services project is that we have a project with the European Union Intellectual Property Office where we are trying to classify or identify goods and services that are used in St. Kitts and Nevis that have names that are not don't make it obvious what the product is. So, for example, we want to make sure that if somebody produces guava cheese here in St. Kitts and Nevis and they end up exporting it to the EU, that they don't think that guava cheese is a dairy product, because the name guava cheese doesn't really suggest what it is. So we have a task now at our office to develop a list of those goods and services and to properly classify them so that it could form part of a database where persons who are interested in registering their trademarks in the EU or anywhere else in the world, Caribbean goods and services, they can go to that database, and then they will be able to see that guava cheese is actually like a jam preserve, a fruit preserve, so that we don't have instances where they classify it wrong and then you don't get the protection that you really want. Another example that we have was draggers. We said draggers. Nobody thinks of draggers and thinks shoes, but for kitchens and divisions, that's something that, you know, is pretty. Is cook up is another one. If you never heard about cook up, what is that? So we're trying to get a list of all of these products so that.
Another one.
What's that?
Somebody told me that we are the only country that we say relish, meaning meat kind.
Meat.
Relish.
That's actually a very good one.
Yes. Relish is usually things that you put on your
Yes.
hot dogs and the
Yes.
condiments and all that sort of a thing. But when we say relish,
Yes,
we
relish
mean
has a
meat.
totally different meaning. Yes. So we're taking notes of these things, and we've had some comments from persons on our Facebook page. Our Facebook page is the Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis. We've gotten suggestions like jelly water. There've been a few suggestions. Well, black pudding. Yeah, a lot of it is food related, but Patnahan, that was actually a pretty good one. So it doesn't have to be something that originated in St. Kitts and Nevis. We just want to make sure that it is, it would be recognized in the EU.
Okay.
So we talk a lot about our culture and protecting our culture, and we get upset when other people try to use our words and use our phrases. But this is a hard and fast opportunity for us to identify what our culture is and have it protected overseas.
Right. So we are talking here in terms of CARIFORUM
Yes.
and
Yes.
its efforts to strengthen the IP legal
Yes.
frameworks.
Right. So the project is part of a larger project called the CAR-IPI or CARIPI project that the CARIFORUM has with the European Union pursuant to the Economic Partnership Agreement that we signed in 2008. So under that project, they're assisting CARIFORUM states to strengthen their national IP frameworks. So to increase, to improve our ease of doing business and to make the processes of registering IP clearer and easier for persons to access. So this is just one small project of that. One that we asked for as a CARIFORUM state as well, because we were asked to accept our about 10,000 phrases and terms from the EU, and all sorts of different kind of sushi and words I can't pronounce and different things like that. But at least if we see it being registered here, then we know what it is because we've seen the list. So we want to ensure that our Caribbean entrepreneurs would
Also
have
make
that
it
same
an
respect
opportunity.
and opportunity in the EU.
Right.
This will be reciprocal.
So we just want the public to give us the suggestions, help us identify things. That's all we're asking. You could just identify things. One person actually, it might sound funny, but one suggestion we received was walking up.
Yes.
Because choreography is a service
It's
that
a
can be
service.
protected. So we want
class
to make
party
sure
one.
we'll put these kind of things, things that we use all the time that perhaps would not be recognizable elsewhere.
Yes. Now, we were speaking about marketing before, and that such a big part of sports and the whole business of sports is that of marketing. But we also have what you call ambush marketing.
Ambush marketing in the sense of what? Everywhere you go on the internet, they
Yes,
show up.
yes.
You talk about shoes, and the next couple of days shoes are all over in
That
your
is
ads.
correct. Yes, that's what I mean. We have a caller. Working for you, good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon, Leroy and the lady there.
Yes.
Earlier o'clock, I heard the lady were talking about copyrights of name, brands, and whatnot. Is that so? Hello? Hello? Can I hear you on the phone?
Hello?
Can I hear you?
We can hear you.
Okay, well, I hear you now.
Okay.
Yeah. Earlier, the lady were talking about copyrights and of different things. That is not true. Well, what years of experience? Some years ago, there was a local Calypsonian, Lord Mike, better known as Harris the cricketer. He sang a calypso named 1, 2, 3, roll back, let me see. And a big singing group in Barbados took up his song without his permission. And they had it on the records. And there was some legal battle between there. And he get a little pittance for his song. So copyright start from way back there. But now here you are talking about culture. Now, in Antigua, they call what we call kanki dukuna. That is Antigua style of calling their kanki dukuna. Our style is calling it kanki. And we don't say bread and peel. In America, they say bread and avocado. So every country have their own name brand for whatever they use. And whenever you go to a restaurant or any place to eat, you could tell an American from a kitchen, even though without the talking. And you could tell if you serve the food with a fish and you got any head, Americans don't eat fish head. Kitchen eat fish head. So right away you know, well, that person over there eating the fish head, they are kitchen. And this one here who eat the fish head, them American. So every country have their culture. And we have so many culture here in this island of St. Kitts Nevis. And I think we better stick to them and do not adapt anybody else's culture and bring it here. And let a foreign culture come and take over our culture. Thank you for listening to me. That's my little input.
Thank you. Right, and here's.
Oh, we may put conky. Yeah, I like that example. Conky is really a good example.
a good one.
Even though we might use conky in St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda may put Dukana on their list, but we are going to make sure, and whoever else calls it something else, they'll put it on their list, so that we make sure that, together we can compile a really comprehensive list that covers the region.
Yes, because in the Caribbean, for example, some people say skinip, some people say guinea.
Yeah.
Some people say chet. There's another word beginning with a C. Yeah.
And I realized Jamaicans call what we call sugar apple, they call it sweet sop. Right. Sweet sop. And yeah, so they're different things. But once we put down these kind of names, we would have that we would be protected.
Right. Good. Now we basically are out of time. We have about 5 minutes left. But for the audience, Jihan, if we could reiterate, for example, the how IP supports the global sports ecosystem and the benefits of the strategic use of intellectual property rights in the sports industry.
All right. Now, this is a big business. Sports is a big business. And there's so much that goes on off the field to make sure that something happens on the field. And these brands, you see, the teams are very extensive brands. The sponsors want to make sure that their brands are associated with the sports. The fans want to make sure that they see the highest quality. So broadcasters would definitely have to step their games up where that is not. They would have to step their standards up where they are not stepping up to the required or desired standards. Sports really is outside of the physical venture. Sports is being held together a lot by things that would qualify for as intellectual property. And that's why it's such a rich venture, or a very expansive financially. The venture is very expensive because people understand, because of the attention that the world pays to sports, that this is big business.
Yes, and apart from being business, so it's the exploitation of the intellectual property for economic development.
Yes.
But it is not just about economics.
Of course not.
So
No.
what are some of the other things that we can talk about apart from the economics? One of the things is about making big money, yes, but it's not about that alone.
No, it's not about that alone, particularly when you make big money to put to other causes. So we see a lot of teams and brands really putting money towards charitable causes. So because we're able, and a lot of athletes as well, using their gains, their economic gains, to really fund, charitable causes and
Corporate citizens.
Yes, and to be good corporate citizens, because they do gain so much. It would really be unfair if they didn't give back to the same public to which is holding them up, essentially. So we start thinking about support for charity. When we talk about the impact of sports and intellectual property, it's also a social exchange as
people
well.
Together.
Yes, bringing people together, and not just bringing people together in the stands, but I'm sure we all learn
Broadcast,
things about, right, through the broadcast. You see different things while you're watching cricket in Australia, and you might notice something. What were the things called? The vuvuzela? Yes, those noisemakers. Yes, we recognize that culturally we get to see how people dress. We get to see how the commentators talk, their accents, the words that they use, and you realize in a lot of instances that we're not that different. We're really not that different, and we react the same way to sports, and we react the same way to winning. We react the same way to losing. So it gives you a sense of social fraternity when you realize that through these kinds of exposures that we're not that different.
Yeah, and through sports, there's so much in terms of the indomitable human spirit.
Yes.
That we have, the perseverance and the discipline and all of that sports really bring out.
And there's also the promotion of non-academic ventures as well, because persons might then see, I shouldn't say non-academic, I would say non-traditional ventures, because someone can be a sports attorney, someone can be a physical therapist.
Sports management.
Sports management. There are so many facilities manager. All these different things are associated with sports. Exactly. So this is actually one of the areas why I particularly was interested in intellectual property, because to be honest, I've never really seen myself living out my days in a courtroom. But I like to be around the arts and music and culture and these sorts of things. And it's a way that through these spin-offs that you can help support the activities that you love. So for me, it's music. For somebody else, it could be sports. And I know there's a lot of attention now being paid to developing careers in those sorts of areas. So we really hope that people in St. Kitts and Nevis, even through our webinar as well, when you realize that you could be an IP attorney dealing strictly with sports. Sports matters. There are sports attorneys for these sorts of issues. So we really want to expose people to these non-traditional areas and to see the benefit outside, deeper than the surface. What shows on the surface is the sports and the grit and the talent and the skill. But somebody is putting those guys or girls on the field, and somebody is reaping benefits from broadcasting it. Somebody is reaping benefits from their name being on their logos. Somebody is reaping benefits from their face or the flags being waved in the stadium and your ads being right to the bottom of a table or you know, these sorts of different things.
Or
There's so much.
tissue.
Yes, somebody took up Messi's tissue. Somebody recognized, Messi left for tissue here, so yeah, eBay straight one time. So somebody is going to buy it because people are that passionate about their sports and their athletes. Mm-hmm. So we think it's time that people in St. Kitts and Nevis start thinking about the commercial side of sports.
Yeah. And another thing too is that sports and entertainment go together.
Absolutely.
For example, at the CPL and so on, you realize they want to have the party stand, and
yes,
it's a party mood.
There are people
but
who go to CPL just
we're
for
having
that.
CPL right now.
Yes.
And while we understand the party mood, we are in a pandemic.
True.
And I cannot see that we are still going to have that party mode in a pandemic. So I suppose it will be a little bit scaled down and so on. Okay, anything else you want to say before we leave?
For me, just to give the details about the webinar one more time. The Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis, in collaboration with the World Intellectual Property Organization, will be hosting a webinar on the 24th and 25th of August from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. each day. We will be, the topic is leveraging intellectual property in the sports arena. So our focus is on issues such as sports and IP, athletes as brand ambassadors, your name and face have value, sports marketing and sponsorship in IP, branding for national athletes and teams, sports tourism and country branding, broadcasting, media rights, and live streaming. So with these issues, we really want to expose the people of St. Kitts and Nevis and the wider region, because it's open to anyone to join free of cost, to the possibilities of the commercial side of sports. Let's not just see sports as a venture where it's physically grueling or it's just for entertainment, but there are different ways in which we can benefit from sports as athletes, as fans, as a country, as sports leaders. So we hope that people will take the opportunity to join our Zoom. The webinar is on Zoom, and if you want the details, the Zoom particulars, you can look on our Facebook page, Intellectual Property Office of St. Kitts and Nevis. The Zoom details for each day are already posted. All you have to do is click and join. We are ready to welcome you. We hope that many people take advantage of this opportunity to learn more about the commercial side of sports. So we want to thank you, Les Roy, for having us here this afternoon and to speak so extensively about sports and intellectual property, and also of our local goods and services project. We really want the input of the the public on that project. We don't want to sit down in the office, because the office is only 5 of us, by the way. We don't want to sit down and come up with things on our own. We really want the public to give us ideas, as they have already done so well, so that we can ensure that when, and not if, but when our entrepreneurs in St. Kitts and Nevis try to register their trademarks in the European Union, because they will be exporting there. We're just trying to do our part to ensure that when you try to protect your brands in the EU, that it's a bit simpler for you. So help us help you by contributing to the project, and I really hope that we have the wider support, and that we see everyone, as many people as possible, tuned into our leveraging intellectual property in the sports arena come next week, Tuesday and Wednesday.
Right. Now, you have other public awareness initiatives. Okay, it's important that people understand the work that your office is doing.
Yes.
And so on, and to go, maybe even to go across different ministries and get them to understand. We have the Ministry of Trade, we have all of that.
Yes, we actually had, well, one of the initiatives that our office does, we call them sensitization sessions, where we go to different government departments and ministries and give them a basic introduction into intellectual property and help them to identify how intellectual property works in their work. So this morning, we actually had a session with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We've had sessions with the Ministry of International Trade. We've also had sessions with Inland Revenue. We have some upcoming for the Ministry of Culture in St. Kitts and in Nevis as well. So we're all over the place. IP is everywhere. And if persons want more information, they can feel free to join, to check out our website, www.ipo.gov.kn. So that's why I'm hoping that we soon see an invitation from SKNIS, that we can start talking about intellectual property and journalism and how people are using your ads and your photos and yes. So we would be more than happy to prepare a presentation for SKNIS, and it's an invitation that's open to all government departments and ministries. If you're interested in finding out how intellectual property is connected to your work.
Thank you. Thank you for that invitation.
Yes.
We will take it up. Nicole, anything you want to say before we go?
No, I'm just looking forward to joining everyone for the webinar next week.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I want to thank you, Jan, and I want to thank Nicola for coming and sharing with us on something that is so important, but yet really something that is not talked about enough. Well, I must say in these parts.
Parts. Definitely in these parts.
Because in other places, it's a big thing. And Jihan, to see that it is not even talked about enough, that I think that you're the only lawyer with a specialization in St. Kitts and Nevis. I don't know if I'm correct in terms of IP, because most of them, they get into criminal law, and that sort of a thing. But as you said, you were interested.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the only one. I know I've had people. I know there are people who are studying now, and I know some people who have done extra courses and exposed themselves to IP. But to my knowledge, it's actually not a lot. Right. So it's an area where we definitely need more minds, because, as I said, if we think about intellectual property as a gateway for ordinary people to find economic stability and strength, then we really have to put our minds together to see how we can develop that, rather than thinking about our traditional sources of revenue like tourism, or even understanding how IP impacts tourism, But for people to recognize that, hey, I could, if I understand how to publish a book, then I can have that book try to make some money for me. And if you understand how you make money from music, then you can understand how you can get royalties and have this additional stream of income. If you've created something that is new and innovative and you think that it's worthy of a patent, then you can consider having it registered as well. So we really want people to start thinking about things in the unconventional way. It's a new thing. It's not new. It's perhaps newer to St. Kitts and Nevis, but this is the way that big Fortune 500 companies are making and sustaining themselves, because they recognize the value of the brands. So much so that they are in China and want to make sure that their brands are protected in St. Kitts and Nevis. So we want people to understand that by focusing on your intellectual property as a vehicle for personal and professional enrichment, that many things are possible and it can be accessed by anyone, regardless of your age, address, or academic prowess. That's what I like to say.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I want to thank all of our listeners to today's program, and we thank our caller to today's program. We continue to bring you information that is important to what is happening here in St. Kitts and Nevis. Today we had a discussion on intellectual property. Thank you very much. Next week we will be back with another edition of Working for You. Until then, I am Les Roy Williams. Take good care.